Hi guys. Oh, let's see. Oh, there we go. All right. Um, all right, you guys. Hello. How's it going?
It's going well. This is Albert.
Hi, Albert.
Hi.
Hi, Jessica. So should
Hey, good
we
afternoon, everyone.
should we wait a moment for Greg, or go ahead and just do our little general intros that we normally do, and then hopefully he'll be on by the time we get through those?
Well, I think we can wait since we don't have a lot of people right now. So,
True. Good point.
you know.
So I made some notes for each of the candidates. I don't know if you had an idea of how we would structure this, but possibly going through each candidate one at a time rather than like an issue at a time, I think seems maybe the best.
Yeah, I think that will work fine.
Yeah, and we can, of course, we can always,
I
go
think we
back
could
to a
wrap it up.
candidate.
Right. I think we can do a candidate at a time and then wrap it up and compare all of them.
Yeah, that would be good. And then if there's something that comes up with a candidate that relates to another candidate, of course, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I've wrote down everybody that we interviewed, and I also wrote down Lars and Chase because we invited them, and they're two of the main ones.
Right.
Hi, Greg. I'm gonna send you an invite to speak. So hopefully he can get that and jump up to the stage. All right, there he is. Hi, Greg.
Here I am. Yes, I'm good. How's everyone else?
Good.
Good,
All
good, good.
right. All right. Well, since we're here, we can start diving in, and then we can start talking about the candidates. So, just to introduce the space and what we're doing, um, we have the Christian Caucus, the Pro-Life Libertarian Caucus, and the Center for Natural Law all represented. And the three groups have concluded a series of interviews of Libertarian Party presidential nominee hopefuls. So, what we've done is gathered our own notes and thoughts based on our interviews and whatever else debates we've seen and messaging we've seen from them over the course of the last, since campaign season has begun. And, we want to kind of go over these notes that we have on each of them as it relates to the things important to each of our groups. And hopefully that could be helpful for other people that have the same um, type of interests, values, and principles that we hold. So, with that, I'll introduce our caucus, the Christian Caucus, and then we'll let the other hosts introduce themselves and what group they're a part of. My name is Kara. I am founder of the Christian Caucus of the Libertarian Party, and our goal is to influence the party with Christian principles. We also want to influence outward, liberty into the world and even to our churches. We want to activate people in our churches um, to be active in the political sphere, and basically we promote voluntarism, and we want to reduce the state just like other libertarians, but we just want to keep our focus where we think that We think that it's important as Christians for God. So that's kind of our main focus. And with that, I'll let Albert go next.
Yeah, I'm Albert Veldhuizen, and I'm the secretary of the Pro-Life Libertarian Caucus. And the caucus was formed before the 2020 National Libertarian Party Convention. And before that, the focus of pro-lifers for many conventions had been to abolish the abortion plank. And that year in 2020, we moved to have the plank abolished as in prior conventions. But we were not successful. We got 45%. But we finally achieved success in 2022 when we received 65% of the delegates in favor of abolishing the abortion plank. So it was deleted by an overwhelming majority. And the caucus goal is to continue that effort and solidify the trend of the Libertarian Party in a more pro-life direction. And I'll quote from our preamble, which says that the Libertarian Party stands for the protection of the rights of the smallest minority, the individual. We cannot think of an individual that needs more protection than a preborn person. We believe that a pro-life stance is the correct stance for the Libertarian Party, and we strive to move the culture of the Libertarian Party towards that stance by supporting candidates for party leadership, nominees to public office, changes to our party platform, and education of fellow members. So I'll turn it over to Greg for any comments.
Center for Natural Law, which refers to ethics, is pro-life, it is pro-family, it is pro-community. In that order, it is a bottom-up approach to life. The natural law really establishes the validity of libertarianism. It's the science that establishes that political position, but it also is strongly pro-life. So it is both pro-life and pro-libertarian. Other than that, it does seek to maximize individual choice, liberty, and refutes or resists constraints from any kind of super organization, in particular government. So it does encourage maximum liberty and the least amount of coercion and restraint from government. Yes.
Thanks, Greg. Jessica, do you want to introduce yourself also?
Oh, my name is Greg Lapointe. I'm with the Center for Natural Law. My apologies. I didn't say that. Yes, I'm with the Center for Natural Law.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Jessica. I'm a co-founder of the Christian Caucus. And yeah, our focus is on, like Kara said, we're trying to overlap where libertarian values and our Christian values overlap and spread kind of both gospels, as it were, and make a change in those directions with our Christian values being our, primary, our foundation. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm excited about this space today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I want to start off by just saying I'm I'm really appreciative of every candidate that's willing to step up and run, because I mean, as you can see, especially like we're on Twitter, you can see a lot of this on Twitter and elsewhere, but I mean, they just get torn apart. They have to deal with a lot of crap. I know, like Jennifer, I see here, works with Rechtenwald. He's had some personal things, like things in his personal life has happened due to his stances on things, or positions that he's publicly said as part of his campaign and stuff, and like there's real negative consequences and repercussions sometimes for these people. And I think it's really important that we do show some level of respect, no matter how vehemently we may disagree with some of these people. Like, I just, we all are on the team of fighting the state. So with that being said, I do think it's also important to really be critical, as difficult as it is, because we want to like them. Maybe for some of us, our problem is we're not critical. while some of us are too critical. So we kind of need to strike a balance of having some respect for these people, but also we need to hold them up against our principles and what we hold important to the core. And for us, we have biblical standards that we're looking at in the Christian caucus. And then the pro-life caucus obviously is, laser focused on the pro-life stance. So we are going to, at the same time, be critical of candidates and what we have found out about their stances on these things. So with that being said, I think we're going to go through one by one each candidate and then wrap up at the end. So we invited initially 6 who we felt like were candidates that were the main ones that would that have been kind of running campaigns or being visible and seeming active on at some level doing debates. So I think I have notes written down here, and they're not in a particular order. Albert, did you have anybody you wanted to lead with, or should we just go randomly? Does it matter to you? Not sure if he heard me. Okay. Well,
Oh, sorry about that. My
There it
my
is.
oh,
mic was my mic was off.
oh, okay. I was
So
like, he might have stepped away for a second.
yeah. So anyway, what I said was, since we interviewed Michael Rechtenwald first, we might as well go with him first and just go in the order that they were interviewed.
Okay. Well, I can't remember the order anymore,
Okay, I
but
have the order.
yeah.
So
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, then let's start with him. Would you like to go first on the pro-life stuff, and then I can follow up?
sure.
Okay.
I mean, I think that Michael Rechtenwald was not the most pro-life, but he was reasonably pro-life, and he definitely claimed to be pro-life. But and he said he was willing to mention it on his website, but as far as I can tell, it hasn't been put on his website. So I think that that's definitely not a focus of his. He's focused on many other issues, but I mean, on the his stances on the issues were, I think, good because he says that he is pro-life and that Dobbs was a good decision. He disagreed with codifying Roe versus Wade, and he thinks that the states definitely do have right to restrict abortion. Um, but him and basically Jacob Hornberger had pretty identical positions on abortion. Um, the only difference is that Jacob Hornberger actually put something on his website on abortion. But I mean, I think that Mike Rectenwald's position is definitely pro-life libertarian, and it's a reasonable position, and there are good reasons for his position. Now, that's basically what I came up with.
Yeah. I my feeling that I got from him was he was decent on the pro-life issue. Definitely not the worst by far. But definitely not as bold as a couple other people.
Right.
So for him, his focus, while he is a Christian, he doesn't seem to lead with that for the most part in his messaging. But I do really like his decentralization focus. And I think that's very compatible and good with things that the Christian caucus might be interested in. Um, I think one good thing about him from a general libertarian perspective is that he does have good backing with like Dave Smith, who has connections to like Joe Rogan and stuff. I think that's kind of like one of his strengths. I think like each of these candidates has something that kind of is uniquely their strength. And for him, I would say his big name backing is something that would be one of his main strengths as a candidate. And yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts I have on him. I like that he could get probably onto big platforms with the message, and he has a good brings. I'll see Greg or Jessica can go next. And then I think we can, there's not a ton of people in here. So if it's all right with you guys, I'd like to give other people a chance to make comments on the candidates, unless you have an objection to that.
No, I don't. But also, just following up on what you're saying, I mean, some of his endorsements are pretty impressive. Like, Judge Napolitano has endorsed him, and some of the other big name libertarians have also endorsed them. Like Gene Epstein. But I'm thinking Napolitano is certainly the biggest name that's endorsed him, and he's known by a lot of people. So.
Right. And even just his being associated with the Mises Institute and things like that are all make him kind of like a more serious candidate, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably his strengths. I wish he was stronger on some of the issues that are important to Christians, including pro-life. But I would say, like, overall, he does have some good strengths. Greg, you look like you're ready to go.
Yeah, I have got this in a much more abbreviated form, and I did put Michael Rickenwald right in the middle of the pack. I would put him in third place of the 5 candidates that we interviewed. I thought he sounded reasonably well, and of course, I was not on Zoom. I was on the phone, and that does matter a little bit. I did see 2 of the 5 candidates, and a visual does impact your opinion a little bit, I guess. So it's not, I didn't see all the candidates, but I have him in third place. I think the pro-life issue is the most important issue, and I think he did mostly well, again, in the middle of the group. And other than that, I was glad that he was for some immigration control. I was really stunned a little bit with some of the answers from the other candidates, but he believes in border control, vetting of immigrants coming in through the southern border, and he was mostly pro-life. So I just have him in third place.
Okay, thank you. And Jessica, did you want to add any thoughts on Dr. Rechtenwald?
Yeah, mostly what I would say as an overall on him is he's probably something like third place. I would probably agree with that. He is good on abortion, but not great on abortion. He's pretty good on the border. He's one of the ones that lines more up with how I feel about the border. He does have connections in the greater libertarian world, and academically he's taught about some of this stuff. It's really good on Marxism. So I would say, yeah, he's at least a number 3. It's really hard for me to rate them like that, but I would generally agree with what's been said so far. And I got to like him more over learning more about him, so that was pretty nice.
I have to agree with that. I also, he grew on me a lot. So
about him, and then I was like, oh, I like this guy.
Yeah, the more I heard from him, the more my opinion of him improved, and he seems like a genuine person. And yeah, I like him as a person, and he's grown on me as a candidate. So what I want to say is, if anybody that's listening wants to just send a request to speak, right now, just specifically about Rechtenwald, we'll go through each candidate, but go ahead and send a request, and I'm happy to bring you up, and you can make any comment you have on him, what you liked or didn't like about him from what you've heard about him so far. You're welcome to do that. And while I give you guys a chance to send up a request, I just wanted to also add the Christian Caucus isn't officially endorsing a candidate this election cycle for president. So anything that we are saying, Jessica and I, these are just our own personal opinions. And, people in the caucus have all different people they support, and that's fine. We're not trying to make everybody go for the same person. So this is just kind of like informational, and I think it's fair that we all share our opinions, and just remember that it doesn't speak for the caucus itself. So thanks for coming up, Jennifer. Go ahead and say what you'd like to say.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I was just gonna say I really liked hearing from Rector One about his personal story and his sort of transformation over time. So especially like it was interesting to hear about how he was. I think he said he was like went to theology school or something. There was definitely like as a teenager, he was very involved and went to schooling. I can't remember exactly what it was. And then you know, as people might do, going to college, you know, sort of sent him down the more like agnostic path. And then with his son's um, illness, like had you know just brought him back to his Christian faith. And so I thought that was like really really compelling and you know has some similarities to like to my family. Just you know my dad, like when I was growing up, was not you know not involved at all in the faith, and now you know he's so involved and sort of has pulled me back in. So I just thought it was great to hear like his personal testimony.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jennifer. I really appreciated that when he came on, he was willing to be so open about that and share his testimony with us. That was really cool. Anytime somebody does that, I think it's really powerful for other people to hear. If anybody else would like to come up to talk about Richtenwald, now is your chance. Otherwise, we'll be going to our next one, which is, was it Toad next?
Yeah, Josh Anderson.
Okay, Josh Anderson, or Toad as he's known on Twitter. I don't have a lot down for him. I just, you know, he's kind of more of like a shit poster type of guy. Kind of doesn't take things very seriously. However, I'm the one that kind of pushed for him to be a part of the interview series, because when you peel back behind a lot of that, he actually holds a lot of very good positions. He's one of the strongest pro-life candidates that there are, and he also aligns with a lot of the principles from that Christians hold. So I think that is why I wanted him to be a part of it, because I just want anybody that was going to be strong on those issues to kind of be able to add their voice on that. So with that, I'll let Albert go ahead and share his notes on Josh Anderson, Toad.
Yeah, I would agree with your assessment. Josh Anderson's policy positions were excellent, very good, but I just don't consider him a serious candidate at all. And so I wouldn't even put him in the mix of people to consider, for example, an endorsement, because he really, I think, is running as a lark and is not putting in the campaign effort to gain the nomination. So, but him and Joshua Smith's positions were pretty identical. And so if you're attracted to Josh Anderson, then you should probably consider Joshua Smith, because he is much more of a serious candidate. So that's all I have to say about Josh Smith or Josh Anderson.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. He's not in the realm of somebody that's seriously running or should probably even be taken seriously. I am still glad that he has shown up to talk about some of the things that when he has talked about them seriously, his positions. I'm glad that there was some, you know, just yet one more candidate talking in that way. So for that, I'm glad that he was around. So let's see, Greg or Jessica, whoever, if you guys had any thoughts on him that you wanted to share before we move on to the
Jessica,
next.
do you want me to go or would you like to?
Oh, you can go first.
Okay, thank you. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I put him in second place purely on his answers. But you're correct. He's not a serious candidate. And so that's a problem. So, yes, he's in second place purely on the answers he provided. I was, again, relieved that there was somebody who believed in some border security. And he wasn't a serious candidate. Okay. That's
All right. Anybody's welcome to hop up too if they want. Send me a request at any time for any of these. We're talking about any candidate, and you can give your input on that candidate at that time. Feel free to send your requests. And go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, I would pretty much just agree with what's been said so far. Policy wise, it's probably one of the best ones, and unfortunately, he's not a serious candidate, but I still made sure to get him on the straw poll for our California convention because why not? And his positions are good, so people need to hear it. Even if he's not gonna really have a chance at the nomination, just like you said, one more voice saying things that are good, and that's pretty much how I feel. I think we actually probably all agree on this one, which I didn't expect us to agree on any of them, but that's where we're at. It's where the chips fall.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then was Josh next?
Yes, Joshua Smith was next.
All right. Josh Smith. Do you want to start, Albert?
Sure. Yeah, in terms of the pro-life issue, Josh Smith had the strongest pro-life position on all counts, by far. And so, I really liked that. And the other thing is that he was also good on other issues that I'm concerned about, such as border security, and also he had the strongest position on transgender procedures, saying basically that we should prosecute the doctors. None of the other candidates ever mentioned that, So he definitely has really strongly felt opinions that I think are right on. So in terms of the policies, I would pick him as number one. But he has been, I guess, disparaged for certain character traits. And, so some people think he's a grifter, a quitter, but he definitely has a lot of support. He has a wonderful website that really goes into depth on why he is pro-life. And he has the most extensive explanation of that of any of the other candidates. And he also explains all his other issues very well on his website. So that's another reason I would put him as number one. So, okay. So, Greg?
yes. Josh was. Oh, okay. Yeah, Joshua
or Kara,
Smith.
I don't know. Mm-hmm.
My apologies. Is it my turn, or is it Kara?
Go ahead, Greg. I'll go after you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I thought I heard my name, so I just jumped right in there. I have Joshua Smith in first place, mostly because of the pro-life position. It's just that simple. I'm the representative for the Pro-Life Libertarian Caucus in Colorado and Nevada. The natural law promotes a pro-life position. I strongly 100% believe the Libertarian Party should embrace a pro-life platform. And so he has the best record on that. He made clear, direct statements that he's pro-life all the way through the interview. So therefore, for that one reason alone, I have him in first place. So, and he was also reasonably good, as the first two we've discussed so far, with border security. That's always, I think, national security should not be dispensed with, at least in an ideological way, just where we just pull in everything, all of our forces or our involvement in other countries. I just think I think it's just not practical, I guess. And so he was not in favor of that as strongly as some of the other candidates. And so, but again, mostly for his strong pro-life position, I have Joshua Smith in first place. Sorry about that if I interrupted.
No, you didn't. You're all good. Okay, so Josh, I get so frustrated because he's got the best messaging. He's got a knack for connecting with people and having strong messaging. A lot of them have a bold message, but he delivers it boldly and in a way that excites people, I think. He puts Christian principles first. He's forward with his faith and family. He knows, he understands specific government interventions that are, incentivizing the breaking up of families, giving states money and programs money for that keeps families broken up with incentivizations. So he can break that down specific policy wise. And not only that, but he talks about it a lot. And he understands, as I think most Christians understand, that the destruction of the family is probably single-handedly one of the major downfalls of our country. We fix the family, we fix our communities, we fix the country, most likely. And so I appreciate all of that. And like you said, he's good on the issues. I think I align with Josh on all of the issues. He of connecting to people, and so then the only thing that I don't really know one way or another what is the truth for, he if he was derelict in his duty for a position, um, either at national or back when he was in California or something. I've heard all kinds of things. I know politics is a weird thing, and when you're on an in group or out group, it's hard to tell what's fully real and what's not. So I have to only take the things that I've heard about him with a grain of salt, but I do take it with a grain of salt. I am, you know, not completely closed off to the criticisms of him when it comes to that. But he really, you know, he really pulls his weight where it counts as far as the messaging. And I feel like a lot of this, the LP presidential nominee, it's about their messaging and about what they're going to be. They're an avatar for the party. They're the face of the party. It's like one of the only times that we breach normie consciousness, so to speak. So he does really well on that side. Now, the other issue with Josh is his messaging. And I know there's arguments to be made for brash messaging. Some, and he doesn't shy away from it. He believes he is fully in alignment with biblical principles and, some of that. I am not convinced that that's biblical. I feel like there is a way to be bold and strong in your stances, and I think it's hard, but I think there's some. I just don't think it's quite there to what it should be. I don't know how to qualify that any better, but I think you guys kind of probably understand where I'm coming from. With that, I'll let Jessica go, and then also we have Joseph has requested to speak. So after Jessica, we'll let Joseph go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I would say from the Christian caucus perspective, Josh is the most bold Christian of all of them. So some others said they were a Christian, and I'm not saying they're not. Just they said they were, and then they don't talk about it otherwise. I do like that Josh talks about it a lot. And like Rechtenwald, he has gotten on big platforms like Tim Pool, so that's a bonus for getting the messaging out. So both of them have that advantage. So yeah, there's definitely pluses and minuses to him though. But I think there's pluses and minuses to everybody. So yeah, I think you guys have pretty much said the things that I would say. So nothing really to add, but I just generally, that's the main thing that sets him apart is like, he puts his faith right in front of you. And so as the Christian caucus, I think that's a big one for us. So I appreciate that about him.
Right on. Thanks, Jessica. And Joseph, go ahead. You have the floor.
Hey, I appreciate that. I think one of the biggest things with Joshua Smith and kind of the one thing that concerns me about other LP candidates is that Josh is not afraid to wield power. And I know that scares a lot of us in the LP. It's kind of one of those things that we really don't like talking about, but at the end of the day, and I think Joshua Smith made a really good point on this. He said something to the effect of, either we're going to get a message out that says, yes, we're willing to wield power against the state and, attack the state, or we just need to shut our doors down and pack up and go home. I think that's the biggest thing with Joshua Smith is he truly understands, I think, the dynamics of politics. Now, like everyone was saying earlier, yeah, he has some skeletons in the closet here and there, but I think when it comes to his bold Christian message would appeal not only to young people, but I think it appeals to many just average people. I mean, I think the one big problem with the Libertarian Party is that we've just had candidates who could not be taken seriously, who were shying away from using power to accomplish libertarian, objectives. And I think that's the one thing that you know that's the reason he's number one on my list. And if I was going up to LP Nationals for the voting thing, I would be throwing a vote in for him. I think at this point, to be a Christian libertarian, I think it's clear cut that he is the number one choice at this point. And that's really all I got to say.
All right. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Joseph. Is there anybody else needs to add to him, or should we go to the next one? Albert, did we have Mike Termott next?
Yes, Mike Termott was next.
Okay. Well, I have a bunch of notes on him. Do you want me to go or do you want to go?
Sure, you can go.
Okay. So Mike Termott, I would say whereas Rechtenwald kind of grew on me more throughout the campaign season, Mike Termott is one that I probably initially held in higher regard, and I have kind of, my support, I guess you could say, has lessened, or my, where I would place him amongst the candidates. I'll just go through a couple of points that I have written down regarding him. So one thing that he consistently kind of says is that about keeping his Christianity separate and his faith separate from policy and from politics, which to me as a Christian just doesn't even make sense, because it should inform everything you do. It should be your foundation from which all things flow. And I wonder if that's perhaps because he hasn't kind of philosophically reconciled Christianity and libertarianism yet. Maybe he needs to think about how they go together a little more. Got to refer him to Libertarian Christian Institute or something. But I think that it's a mistake to say that. And I mean, I almost prefer someone that says they're not a Christian, that aligns with us in their principles, than someone saying they are a Christian, but that's a completely separate issue from how they're going to approach their campaign and policies, because that just doesn't make any sense to me. And the other, at least I could understand. So that's kind of a negative, I would say, for Mike Tremont. Now, a positive I have next is that he's, and people always say this about him, he's really professional. He would not look like a joke, if he was our nominee. He's a kind person. He's not a mudslinger. And those are kind of his positive qualities. He did at one point talk about, winning if he was the nominee, that there was a chance at winning, which he has walked back. I just feel like that was kind of a weird stance that he used to have. I didn't like his abortion. He did the kind of the thing, when he explained his Christianity as it affects policy. He kind of applied that style of thinking to abortion, and he said it should be. I don't know. He basically is pro choice, I guess you could say, but saying he's pro life, which that for me is kind of a hard pill to swallow when people call themselves pro life, but then when you actually tease out the stance, you go, well, that's actually just a fancy, long, windy road to saying you're actually pro choice. So, um, then and then this was another thing where he kind of lost me, was saying that politically we need to stay within the bounds of culture, which to me sounds like you're going to be letting culture dictate, what, well, I don't know what your messaging is, what your policies are, and what your stances are on things. And I think there's something to be said about meeting people where they're at when you're trying to explain something or break them down towards your position, in a sense. Maybe there's some value in that, but I don't think that your actual position should be so fully limited by where culture is, because I can tell you, I mean, you guys know culture is in a bad shape. So there's no way I would want a nominee who's using that as kind of a guide for where they stand on things. Um, and then I recently saw in a debate he was talking about which it seems kind of weird. He said that if the Mises Caucus board did a silent vote, that the endorsement of the Mises Caucus would have gone to him. And that has kind of come out as a lie. And I don't really know why he would say that. So that seemed kind of strange also. Um, and I know that's a lot of negatives, but I actually, as a person, I like him. I think he seems like a really great guy. I'm just a little concerned about some of his approaches, policy wise and campaigning wise, and for his positions. So that's all I've got on him, and I'll let someone else go next. Go ahead, Albert. I think you haven't gone yet, right?
No, I haven't. So yeah, I'd like to kind of echo a lot of what you said, because just like you, he
Oh, wait, Greg, can you mute? Sorry, it's kind of making it echoey.
yeah, just like you. I mean, I held him in higher regard before the interview, and then it kind of went down, specifically because of the life issue. Because again, he does claim to be pro-life, and I would still consider him pro-life, but he has all these caveats to it. And because, I mean, on his website, it clearly says that he does not believe government should be involved prior to viability. And he applies that across the board on his website to all governments, which would include state governments. And so he's basically saying that states can restrict abortion after viability, but not before. I guess you could say that's still kind of a quasi pro-life position, because you are restricting abortion, but philosophically that doesn't make sense, because if you believe in science, you ought to believe that life begins at conception, and that from then on there should be restrictions. Now, it's one thing to say, well, politically, that won't stand in a particular state, and therefore, we should at least compromise in order to get some kind of restriction. But I don't think that was what he was saying. He's trying to take a philosophical position of no restriction prior to viability. And it does not make sense from a pro-life position. But he did say that Dobbs was a good decision, and he was against Roe versus Wade, and he's totally against codifying Roe versus Wade. And but what was interesting was he was the only candidate who said that the Libertarian Party should have a plank on abortion, but that the plank, the only thing it should say is that the federal government should not be involved. And then the state LPs too should also have a plank that says federal government should not be involved. So he wants to remain silent on the issue of states, which is, I guess, good in the sense that, you know, he's for allowing the states to make their own policy, even though he does believe that the states should not restrict it prior to viability. So it's kind of a weird position, and it's kind of like in between, let's say, you know, Josh Smith and let's say Chase Oliver or Lars Mapsett, that we can talk about later. But so I do still put him in the pro-life camp, but I think that he was the weakest of all the pro-life candidates that we interviewed. And then he also kind of takes a middle of the road position on other issues as well. So he's kind of like, to me, the middle of the road candidate. For example, on open borders immigration, on the one hand, you know, we interviewed Jacob Hornberger, who's incredibly open borders, and then, you know, Josh Smith, who's against. And he was kind of like in the middle, saying, you know, he believes that there should be proper vetting for security, but, you know, it should be pretty much open other than that. So that's my general impression of Mike Termott. That, and I do agree that he's very professional. And in fact, I would say that he was probably the most professional candidate that we interviewed. So I think his delivery and manner and everything was at the top, but his policy positions, to me, left something to be desired. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Albert. Yeah, well said. Greg, were you ready to go?
I am ready to go. And I agree with most of what Albert just said, if not all. I thought his presentation was good, much like the final candidate that we interviewed. He was a little bit troubling for me, actually, for more than one reason. He was not pro-life enough. I think his comments on the border concerned me, among other things. National defense. The pro-life was just too weak. He thinks abortion is fine there's no restrictions to abortion prior to viability. That's alarming. That is just totally unacceptable. As a pro-life libertarian caucus representative in Colorado and Nevada, I just reject that position outright. Yes, he had a good demeanor about him. He was a police officer, so he had good credentials. But also some national defense comments concern me. The last two gentlemen we're talking about here, Termott and Hornberger, they both were similar I detected a certain impracticality about implementing libertarian principles. And although that's not a specific question we ask, I think libertarianism and the principles of libertarianism must be implemented in a practical, commonsensical kind of way, not ideologically. And I just got that sense from Mike Termott and the last gentleman, just that their implementation of libertarian beliefs was it was absent practicality. And I don't think you can be a political leader if you're not practical. You've got to do it in a sensible, commonsensical, realistic way that takes everything into account. And some of their comments just did not measure up to that expectation. So he looked fine, good credentials, unacceptable position on life. And I'm not sure he had leadership qualities in terms of implementing some of our libertarian principles. That's my position.
Thanks, Greg. If anybody else wants to come up and make a comment on Mike Termott, you can send a request to speak while Jessica gives her thoughts.
Yeah, what I would say to that is, you mentioned the culture. That's pretty much the comment I was going to make, is that he had indicated very heavily in one question we asked. I don't remember what the question was, but he indicated that it would pretty much be whatever the culture allows. And I can't rectify that with my Christian values. I also can't rectify that with trying to correct our government from our libertarian values. So that's just an overall thing that I've noticed as well. Watching, I have a goal of watching all of the debates from the different state parties, their conventions, and I've watched several. I haven't watched all of them yet, but I've watched several of them, and that's another thing that I've noticed in general. Not every single policy, but in general, Vermont kind of takes a middle of the road, tries to find what other people have said and restate it, but I don't find a strong stance on anything. And so that combined with the culture comment that he made with us, I just think if he were the president, he's not going to be running his presidency. We all know the Libertarian's not going to win this time, but that's the issue that I would have. But he seems like a nice guy. I didn't get a chance to talk to him when he was here at our convention. I wanted to, but I didn't get a chance to. But he seems, I'd probably enjoy hanging out with him, having dinner. But that's the issue that I have, and it's not my number one at this point. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, and final thing I'll just add is Mike Tremont has been one of the hardest working candidates. I know that guy has been all over, showing up to everything, being available, and is always willing to give a lot of his time. And I think that's really great that he's been doing that and been willing to do that. And I appreciate the people that have been taking their campaign seriously like that. And I would say he's probably the strongest when it comes to taking his campaign seriously and putting in the work like that. Full throttle, always on the go. So that was just one final thing I wanted to say about him.
I'll add to that really quickly, just to agree. But more than a year and a half ago, I heard him already campaigning out on the road. So that's just amazing dedication right there. So I just wanted to add, like, that's really a strong, that's a strong quality.
Okay, so I think next would be Jacob Hornberger, correct, Albert? That
That's
would be the
right.
last one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll talk about Jacob Hornberger, and then we'll talk about the other two after, I believe, that we didn't end up having interviews with, and we'll just do based off what we've been able to gather about them on our own, since we didn't interview them. So Jacob Hornberger, um, so he's really likable as far as, I don't know, there's just something likable about him. And he's very principled, but he's principled to a point of like almost binary thinking, too black and white. There's bold and uncompromising, and you can do it in a way that's almost not good. So I would say part of that is he likes to lead with just ending Social Security and opening the border, which might be good in principle, but he's not acknowledging the nuance to those things and the other trade-offs that are coming with that, which I think is important, especially as a messenger of the party, to acknowledge those kinds of things and speak to trade-offs and maybe even have solutions for them, instead of just, we're going to tear this all down, and then what? What about the people in the wake of that? Whether it's just having completely open borders or taking away grandma's monthly paycheck. So I think that isn't a good strategy of messaging that he has chosen. So, but on the other hand, I appreciate that he's bold and uncompromising, whereas Mike Tremont, we just talked about, kind of waffles around issues and plays almost besides playing middle, I would say he almost plays both sides of an issue more so than sitting on the fence of it. And Jacob Hornberger definitely doesn't do that. So I I would give him credit for his bold, uncompromising messaging, but I would also state that he kind of does it in a way that's also a fault as well as a strength. As far as his Christianity goes, that you know, I just like, I don't judge, like I don't like to say like, oh, that person's really Christian or that person's not. But man, I heard him one time, just like the way he talked about his faith seemed so genuine. Kind of like when Dr. Rechtenwald shared his testimony, and it always just really touches my heart when I hear people speak from the heart about their faith, and that meant a lot to me to see that in him. So I really appreciated him having a soft share on that. And then let's see. He okay, so so like I said, he keeps talking about the border and Social Security, and then he's he's a really good intellectual. I know he's done a lot of writings. I'm not sure if he's taught or what, but I know he's written books and stuff, and he's very strong intellectually and with libertarian philosophy. One thing, okay, this is like, it almost feels like mean to say, but he almost comes across softly racist, like, but in the way that your grandpa does, that it's like, you don't even almost fault him for it, like with, just kind of comments like, oh, but the Mexicans are that, talking about the open border, they're the hardest workers, and just, they're all, and then kind of like putting it all, just kind of making these sweeping comments about immigrants like in a certain way. And I go, I don't know if that would be good to be having on a more national stage outside of the party to represent us. It doesn't seem racist, but it almost just comes across as a little out of touch, because he actually also didn't really seem to understand the border issue as it is today, because when he talked about it, he seemed to more be referring to concerns people had about the border 20 or 30 years ago, in my opinion. So, with that, I'll let someone else go next. Go ahead, Albert, if you want to go with the pro-life.
Sure. In terms of the pro-life issue, I think that his position was pretty identical with Michael Rechtenwald's. On all the questions that were asked, he answered the same way. And so he's not the strongest pro-life candidate. Joshua Smith would be strongest, but I'd say both Rechtenwald and Hornberger would be number two on the pro-life issue. Like he's against codifying Roe versus Wade. He thinks Dobbs was a good decision. He actually, unlike Rechtenwald, though, he actually does have a blurb on his website about abortion and clearly says that he's pro-life. Although on his website he doesn't really go into depth about it, but rather on the abortion issue he switches right away to the war issue and says, well, if you want to be pro-life, you have to be consistently pro-life and not support overseas wars and stuff like that. So he doesn't really focus on the abortion issue, even though he does mention it on his website. So I guess he is he's committed to the pro-life position, but again, I don't think it's an important part of his campaign. Although, since it's on his website, it's probably a little more important than how Michael Rechtenwald feels about it. But otherwise, they're pretty much equal on that. Pretty much had the same position for the states, that the states could restrict abortions, and that would be a good thing. Unlike Mike Termott, who wavered on that, and also, he felt that the Libertarian Party shouldn't really take a position on the issue, which was the same position as Michael Rechtenwald, but that state Libertarian parties could. The big difference between the two candidates that I saw was on the non-abortion issue of immigration, where Jacob Hornberger's position is 100% diametrically opposed it seemed, to Michael Reichenwald's position. And I do think that Jacob Hornberger can, just like you were saying, can come across as way too ideological and doesn't have the practical solutions to issues. And like on the issue of Social Security, you just don't want to cut everybody off of Social Security at once, because that's just going to create riots all over the country. You have to have a phase out period. But he's just very, very, I guess, doctrinaire about these things, and he doesn't try to implement libertarianism in a practical way. So those are my comments on Hornberger.
All right, thanks, Albert. And Jessica or Greg, whoever would like to go next.
Jessica, did you want to go?
You can go first. That's fine.
Okay, thanks again. Yeah, some of my comments mirror much of what has been said. I view, I'm sorry, I got it also on the phone. Hornberger the same as I view Termott a lot. He wasn't sufficiently pro-life. I thought his national defense position was, I'm going to be kind and respectful, but I thought it was just not realistic. And so too with the border. I just think that if we know there's a bad guy that's in another country that is planning on harming us, bombing us, laying plans to do harm to America, we absolutely have to go overseas to address that issue. But yes, as a libertarian, we should pull back from unnecessary involvement in foreign conflicts to the extent possible, but not just ideologically a sweeping pulling back, which seems to be his position. He just really was adamant about that. We just should get out of all foreign countries, and that troubled me a little bit. I just don't think that's realistic at all. And yes, like Albert indicated, and also like I mentioned about Tremont, I think it was a bit. I sensed an ideological approach. Yes, we're libertarians, and yes, we're pro-life. Sometimes there has to be, I don't want to use the word compromise. I'd rather use the word practical implementation of some of our policies and let them grow and advance over the course of time. I just think that you have to be practical, realistic, and do things not ideologically, but rather practically, and hang on to your principles at the same time, no doubt. So he was that way a bit for me, and his open border was just completely unacceptable. The national defense position, completely unacceptable, and not sufficiently pro-life. So I really had him in fifth place, but more or less a tie with Tremont. I would also agree that he was a likable guy. He was. He had a nice, friendly appearance. Somebody you'd want to go out and drink beer and shoot pool with, maybe. But as a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, I think he is probably in fourth or fifth place for me. And incidentally, I am going to switch to a phone. There may be a slight lag, 5 or 7 seconds more, but I'd like to stick with the group. I am switching to a phone. And those are my comments.
Thanks, Greg. Go ahead, Jessica, if you'd like to share your thoughts.
Yeah,
now.
so Hornberger, I knew that name many years ago, and I was so excited when he was announcing. I don't see him as a serious candidate for the nomination because while he is very principled, he is, I believe you said it, out of touch. Like the border stuff, in theory, what he's saying might be great, but not with other issues that we have going on right now. And, without any changes to those issues, opening the border wide open would just be a disaster. So there are some issues like that where I think he is principled, but the application isn't in tune with what's happening. But I definitely want to hang out with him. And I loved his genuine, you could feel like something change when he talked about his faith. I would go to church with him and, I don't know, have Sunday dinner or something. He's a wonderful person, but I don't think he has a shot. And it's just because of the messaging. really, and we just need a better messenger.
Right. Okay. So that wraps up the 4 that we personally interviewed. So the other 2 we have left that we had invited to interview but didn't are Lars and Chase. So Albert, do you have a preference on which one we go through first?
Yeah, let's go through Lars first.
Okay. Do you want me to share first?
Sure.
Okay, so Lars, I don't really know a ton about him, just mostly what most people know about him probably. But I do think he has some interesting things about him and some things that I'm not really a fan of as well. He has a lot of money that he's throwing into his campaign, which is, that's great that he's got a lot of money to back himself. It is an expensive thing to run for president. So I think that's kind of a plus. On the other hand, I think he has leaned on that a little bit in place of doing the type of work that some other people have done, such as like we were talking about how Termont has spent tons of time, trying to outreach to delegates and speak with people, give lots of his time. So I don't know if that's, he just feels like he could buy his way in a sense. So one thing I felt was very interesting was his idea of trying to go all in on one small state, which he named as Maine, and trying to get like put all of our resources and focus on that state and win one state in the general election. And I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. He said if you look up at the map and then you got Maine, just one state being gold, and how cool that would be. And I thought, well, that is kind of cool. So that was something that I did like about him, was that he had an interesting idea as far as the general election and how to approach it, that I hadn't heard any other candidates say something like that before. And I don't really know if that's a great idea. I just thought it was interesting. I appreciate when people think outside the box a little bit. So that being said, obviously, as a Christian, I'm not really a big fan of his whole Friendster thing. And to be honest, I don't really know fully what it is, but I've heard it compared to like a OnlyFans sort of thing. And if that's kind of where he earned all of that money he's using to fuel his campaign, then it's kind of icky in my opinion. But other than that, I'm not super familiar with his policies. And so all I have really about him is what I just shared. So I'll let Albert go ahead and go.
Okay, just like you, I don't know a whole lot about him, but I do know that he is not pro-life. He's pro-choice because it's clearly stated on his website and also on the questionnaire that he filled out on the I Side With website. And so, he clearly says he's pro-choice, and he does not believe the states should be able to restrict abortion, and so that's pretty much what I know. So I presume that he would be supporting Roe versus Wade or codification of Roe versus Wade, although I did not find anything specifically that says that. Whereas for Chase Oliver, it's much more clear that he's the most pro-abortion candidate out there. He on other issues, Lars takes a position similar to all the other candidates we interviewed. For example, should transgender procedures be available to minors? And all of the candidates that we have interviewed said no. But Chase Oliver is in favor of minors being able to go through transgender procedures. So he's the only candidate to be in the affirmative on that issue. On the open borders immigration issue, Lars takes a similar position with Mike Termont. He does believe that those coming in should be properly vetted for security concerns. So That's all pretty much all I know about Lars. But in any case, to me, he wouldn't be. I wouldn't consider him a viable choice to vote for. So.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jessica. And if anybody else wants to request to come up and speak at any time about any of the candidates so far, please send a request.
Yeah, so about Lars, yeah, I would agree. He's open border, but he wants a process, which is better than what it seems we have now. His background, as you've mentioned, with that one website is definitely where he gets money from. However, I know he has done other websites and businesses, so it's not, at least it's not all from there. But if he's doing something good with that money, I could see that as like not necessarily a repentance, because he doesn't, he's not a Christian, but he doesn't say it as like that was bad, so I'm doing good with it. But he wasn't. I guess it wasn't really his intention. So, whatever you think of that, there's more to the story that I don't know. But yeah, he's not a Christian. He doesn't have that foundation to base his policy decisions on and things. So that's always a question of, well, where does it come from? Well, it comes from his libertarianism. So I think he's got some solid stuff. I haven't gotten a chance to talk with him. I'm supposed to have a phone call with him one of these days, so I'm looking forward to that, to learn more, maybe in-depth stuff. But he seems like a nice guy. I've had a little conversation with him, just not much of one. I've seen him be upset about an injustice, and I appreciated that. And so there's good and bad to him. He's probably not the one I would pick, but he's not the worst. So he's in that middle ground somewhere. It's hard to rank them, but he's in that middle ground.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to rank the candidates in my opinion. I definitely just have like kind of a top and then a bottom. Okay. Greg, you dropped off, but we were just finishing up talking about Lars. If you want to add anything about Lars.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, great. I'm driving now. So, okay, good. That worked out fine. So, I have a couple of general comments, and it's because in interviewing these candidates, it should be no surprise that I gained some insights myself. It was a learning experience on my end as well. So, I have some general comments to make, nothing about the remaining two candidates that were not interviewed. So, should I say those now or should I wait till the end?
If you don't mind waiting, if you do have to jump off, then you could go ahead and share
No,
that
I'm
now if you
driving for the
want.
next 30 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, we should be done. We'll have plenty of time.
Okay.
So, we'll go ahead and move on to Chase. I'll go ahead and look at my notes here with, okay, so Chase, as Albert mentioned, he's kind of a dubious stance on the transition of minors. I'm a mom, so I'm very mama bear on this issue. And that's kind of a hard line in the sand for me. Now, I know previously he's full on shown support of transitioning with surgery of minors, but I know more recently he's walked that back at least to an extent. And he doesn't, and I don't know if it's just surgery now he says minors shouldn't do, or if it's all medical transitioning. He's definitely for transitioning of minors being completely open and free, but I'm just not sure if that includes puberty blockers and hormones or not. So I just think, oh, I think all of it's child abuse. So that's kind of like a really bad position of his, in my opinion. However, even though he has a very bad stance on that, unlike, for example, Jacob Hornberger, who leads with his bad stances and is very, you know, stubbornly putting them in your face, I would say Chase leads with more big tent messaging of libertarianism. A lot of his stuff that he says and he puts out, at least that I come across, so, I could be missing stuff too. I would say in general, a majority of it seems to be more stuff that appeals to a broader um, audience of libertarians and could probably even be palatable to people who aren't libertarians. And I think that is a strength of his. Um, he also works very hard. And one thing I do know about Chase is that he's he's an on the ground activist, which I give credit to that because a lot of people just kind of live their lives and then jump in the ring, and he actually does a lot on the ground for the liberty movement. Another negative policy, and this is one I heard directly from him when he's like Mike Tremont, been going around a lot. He came to San Diego and we had a chance to meet him and ask him questions. And I didn't find this super libertarian, to be honest, which is kind of like an equal rights under the law until the law is gone position. So the two examples of that are like marriage. Like he supports gay marriage, whereas I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I just think the state should be completely out of marriage altogether. It's not, should not be something between me, God, and the state. It should just be between me and God and done at church. So I don't really care for that. And then for example, this is a really bad one that even people who aren't Christian might scratch their heads at, is welfare. So under his kind of general principle of equal law or equally applied state until we've diminished it, he thinks that welfare for immigrants is, according to that principle, is good. So we should have open borders, let immigrants in, and then let them all go on welfare because they're no different than an American citizen. So we should make it equal for them. And I mean, just I mean that just kind of like, yeah, I can't even begin to justify why someone would have that position so much. I think it's a terrible position. So those two main negative stances that he has, or stances that I find as bad positions, are such deal breakers for me. But I did want to point out the positive things about him because I think that, I mean, honestly, it's stuff that other candidates could benefit from. He's a good messenger. He's a good messenger. He doesn't seem to want to be a mudslinger. Um, and yeah, so he's got some good things about him, but man, the deal breakers are deal breakers. So that's my thoughts on Chase.
Okay, shall I go next?
Yeah, go ahead, Albert.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good summation of his non-life issues. Now, in the life issue, I think he's absolutely terrible. I mean, he's the worst of the bunch. Definitely pro-abortion. In fact, he's so much pro-abortion that when Roe versus Wade was overturned, he called for codifying Roe versus Wade at the national level to force the states not to touch abortion. So, as far as I know, he's the only one of the libertarian candidates in the running. Maybe Lars might be in the same camp, but he's on record as saying that. So obviously, he would prohibit any state restrictions on abortion, and so just for that reason alone, I think he's totally out of the running for me. But I think that's kind of goes hand in hand with some of his other positions, which really are, from my point of view, more Democrat light. So I see him as the libertarian candidate who's basically a mouthpiece for basically the Democratic Party within the Libertarian Party. So on some economic issues, he might be totally correct, just like all the other libertarian candidates, because I think they're pretty much unified on economic issues. But on the social issues, I think, and also on immigration, I think that Chase Oliver is the worst of the bunch. And also, you're correct that he is very well spoken. He's really smooth, but I see a lot of evidence that he's a behind the scenes mudslinger. And he's definitely one of those who's going to have the most friction with the current leadership of the Libertarian Party, because I've seen Twitter posts that he's put that really cut down on certain people within the leadership of the current LP. And so I think he'd be the most uncomfortable for the current LP to host as its presidential candidates. And so it'll, I think, sow division and disunity in the LP if he is the nominee. And I think he really represents the, more of the pre-2022 old guard of the Libertarian Party. So those are my thoughts on Chase Oliver.
Thank you. Jessica, would you like to go?
Yeah, so I would say, like Termont, he is a very hard worker. He's been campaigning for well over a year that I'm aware of. I think he is good at messaging. He's getting out on, whatever platform he's on, whether it's LP debates or there was a national debate that he and Lars were on. He is very good at talking to people about our economic problems and the wars and general libertarian issues. So I think he would be a benefit there, but I don't agree with him on some other things, like, the being a Christian. I just can't agree with him on certain things. So I have a hard time with those. But yeah, he's got hardworking and messaging behind it. And I think that some other candidates who might have better policies in those areas maybe aren't as good at messaging. Who knows? They all have their strengths, and that's one reason it's really hard to rank them all. But we'll see what happens in May.
Thanks. And I know Greg had some general comments, and if any of you couple of people down there just listening want to share comments about any of the presidential candidates, any strengths or weaknesses that you wanted to share your thoughts about, go ahead and send a request and I'll bring you up for this ending thing. I see Jennifer, so I'll let Greg go ahead and share his general comments, and then Jennifer, you can go ahead and speak after that.
Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
One of my biggest concerns, or among my biggest concerns, really came out with with Hornberger, and that is he referred to the Republicans and the Democrats as the same thing, purely on a strategic basis, not principles, not on any other basis, purely strategic. And I hear it among many libertarians. Democrats and Republicans are the same thing. Respectfully, that is a bit of a lazy response. Pardon me if I don't want to offend anybody. For this reason, if you were to make a list of Democratic platform positions and Republican platform positions, they would be largely different. Now, do they sometimes vote for the same big spending, which we libertarians hate? Yes. Is that enough reason just to consistently refer to them as the same thing? I don't think so. And it's especially bad strategically. And I am repeating that word. They are different. They are not the same thing. And if the Libertarian Party, and I gathered this from talking or listening to the Libertarians, primarily the last two. But I do hear from many libertarians that the Democrats and the Republicans are the same thing. I think that is a bad habit. I think libertarians should stop saying that. We should come up with a different response, maybe one that is just more finessed, more realistic. They are similar in voting patterns when they vote for these big spending bills, no doubt, and perhaps in other ways too. But if you would create a list, there is distinction, there is difference. Therefore, the response, they are the same thing, is incorrect. It's just not a truthful answer. And especially strategically. It is not a good thing to do. What you want to do is you want to cozy up, so to speak, to a more powerful force. We will stay at 5% or 3% in the voting polls or 7% forever unless we gain some political friends. Just you know, I think in one of my interviews I mentioned that we joined Russia, who we were not great friends with prior to World War II. We allowed them to fight with us. We weren't good friends with Russia at that time, but we accomplished a greater goal. And so, for that reason, I would say that I think the Republicans are probably, I don't think there's any doubt that they're closer to the Libertarian Party. May not be close enough by any means, but closer than the Democrats. And therefore, if we want to advance politically and in many ways, we probably want to join forces with other politicians and political groups that can help us advance our libertarian goals and principles. That's one comment. The other one is, let me see if there is another one. Just the last one might be, I think there has to be a recognition of practicality, and this needs to be seen in answers from politicians. You know, just to give you an example, San Francisco and Seattle, and there's a famous area or notorious area in Pennsylvania where the drug dealers have destroyed the town, and things are just getting worse and worse, and it's just depravity, and it's hellacious, it's disgusting. Free drugs may not work. So our principles are people should be allowed to do what they want to do, maximum liberty. But if there's something of practical consequence that we need to modify some of the practical implementation of our principles, I think we need to go in that direction instead of just insisting ideologically of stating everyone should have free drugs. Well, if it doesn't work practically, then maybe we need to revisit that just a bit as a practical matter. Those are my two last comments.
Thanks, Greg. And go ahead, Jennifer, and share your thoughts.
Oh, thanks. So I was just going to talk a bit about Lars and Chase. I was really disappointed that they were the only ones that got this debate stage with Jill Stein and a couple socialists. I was disappointed because they absolutely did not push back against socialism at any point in the debate. I think the debate was about an hour long. And it was just so frustrating. We have this opportunity to get our message out there and sort of, help the left and others in the center more understand, what libertarian is in terms of from economic policy and, why socialism is so bad. And they completely failed. They completely failed. It was really embarrassing. And then this like unicorn socialist person ended up winning the debate. I mean, it was just that was disappointing. And then I also just wanted to talk about Lars's strategy for the one electoral vote. I think one, the strategy has been thought of before and it didn't work, and then two, it would really hurt states like like Texas and other states that they get ballot access based on like percentage and total number of votes, and the presidential candidate in that state helps. And so if you're doing the campaign for the electoral vote, that basically means you're only running your campaign in Maine. And so the rest of the states would suffer because they wouldn't have any presence from the candidate, and it would just be focused on one state. And so we could end up losing ballot access for what? Like, we probably won't even get the electoral vote. So I just really don't like the strategy. And then also, Chase and Lars both favor a flat tax, or no, they call it a fair tax. And I completely disagree with that. I think that would harm the poor in significant ways, just in terms of having that, like, it's a consumption tax. So yeah, I just think that we shouldn't be having somebody representing the party be advocating for for the flat tax or fair tax or whatever they call it. So just a couple of thoughts there, and then like you said about Lars's foray into the porn industry is very concerning to me as a Christian. And yeah, it's just like pretty disappointed how he just sort of like blows it off in different interviews that he's been asked about it. And yeah, it's a pretty big deal to me. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate hearing your thoughts, and it was interesting to hear you expand the strategy of the main thing a little more and how that could also be a negative. So you took away my one positive thing I had to say about Lars. Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Okay. No, I don't know. I still think it's interesting. Maybe yeah, but maybe it's not a great strategy like you said. Okay, so I think Jeff, you just came on up to give some comments, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Greg about something he said because he said that Mike Termott's policies were too ideological and not practical. And that kind of baffled me a bit, especially because he held up other candidates that as being very like principled. And I don't know what the difference he's saying is in terms of what. So I want to get specific. What policies that Mike Tremont advocates do you think are not practical or in their implementation? And for the candidates that you place above him, what specifically do they have that is more practical or you think more realistic?
Well, okay. Just double checking here. You can still hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good, good. Just double checking. I am driving, and so I am not looking at my notes from the file. But I will. I can only speak generally. The last two gentlemen, the last two candidates that we interviewed, Termott and Hornberger. Termott was not as bad as Hornberger. Hornberger was way too ideological in his approach to, or his perception and approaches in libertarianism. Termott, not as bad, but I did, and I mentioned this when I did my review of Termott. The hint of it started to develop with him. I don't have the notes in front of me to give you specifics. I'm driving, so that's the best answer I can give you right now. He was not sufficiently pro-life.
Yeah, that part I
That may
understand.
not.
But
Okay.
that's the part that confuses me because if the problem is his pro-life, that he wasn't ideological enough in that area, I'm curious how that becomes a problem that somebody is too ideological or not practical enough. I'm trying to reconcile those two things you said.
Well, to be pro-life is not being ideological. It's being scientifically practical. Okay, so if he's not scientifically, he's not pro-life enough. Therefore, he's not scientifically practical enough. And if he wants to just pretend that a human life is just a concept and versus a reality, then he is ideological on that one point,
Okay, so you're not
facilitating that
talking
people like.
practicality as in politically practical. You're talking a whole different definition of that.
Well, I am talking about political. It just I know again. You asked for specifics. I'm driving. I don't have those, and so I am talking in generalities here, and that's the best I can do. And so I can't get to your specifics. But just off the cuff, pro-life is really a practical consideration. Uh, yes, it has a conceptual component to it, a justification, explanation, which is conceptual behind it. But it really has to do with the practicalities of a fertilized egg in a womb that grows and develops into a human being. That's very practical. And so the opposite position would be really one that's ideological, claiming that it's a choice. is a detachment from reality, actually, is what it is. And so on that point, if he's pro-choice on that one single issue, he would be ideological and not practical. But I think you want it, and so you're saying that that's not political, but it's a judgment call that is reflective of perhaps his other positions. And I'm not, as I said earlier, there were just some indications of an ideological implementation of his ideas. Let me see here. Was he an open borders guy? Let me look at my notes here. I think he open borders, yes, right?
Well, he
He
was
is open borders, isn't
modified. He was modified in the sense that he also believed in proper vetting and not totally open borders. Like,
he? Okay.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, okay. That's the best I can do for you. I am traveling to a location. But any
Okay.
follow-up question to that?
Oh, I appreciate your attempt to answer it. I also was a bit confused on the border stuff that you seem to be putting it in uh, a perspective that made it sound like a pro-immigration position or, against immigration control position was somehow not a Christian position. And I know you didn't say that in so many words, but it just, I don't know how that is a more pro-life position or a fits more with Christian principles in any way. So if maybe if it's just your
Well,
personal viewpoint of what's practical, but that
no,
part
I
confused me too.
think Well, I can answer that question. I think it's distinct from pro-life. There may be some parallels if you would get into the further analysis of it, perhaps. But and it's very Christian. It's not Christian to allow a country to be overrun. It's not Christian to allow all the mayhem that has occurred. It's not Christian to take from some people and give to illegal aliens. That's not Christian. I mean, my money is being given to people that are here illegally. Now, I believe that Americans own America. See, I think some libertarians might look at private property as just something, a singular individual. We are connected to each other. We are not automatrons, even in a libertarian perspective. I'm not, and this isn't to justify large government programs, but it is to say that we are connected to each other as a country. Nationalism is not opposed to libertarianism. I just think that Americans own America as their own private property. And just as somebody is not entitled to walk into your house uninvited, people are not, should not walk into the country uninvited. And open
Well,
borders is anti-libertarianism,
I
in
would
my
say
view.
that the history of America is dependent on people who came here, many of which were not invited. But I won't go off in a long debate about that because this is about the presidential candidate. So I won't waste anybody's time on that, but I'll just leave it at that. And thanks for answering.
Well, I just will say this. I think there are distinctions between early immigration and immigration today. There are important distinctions. They're not the same thing. When you make comparisons, there are some things that are similar and some things that are different. The differences are sufficient in the present day situation where, no, it is not right for foreigners to be just running across the border and getting free stuff in this country. It's wrong. It's a violation of our rights as a country, as individuals. Our tax dollars are being given away to people who are not entitled to be in this country, and just for all to free phones, free housing, free medical. No one's advocating being cruel to another human being. Certainly not. We should be kind. We should open our hearts, no doubt about it. But laws are a very human and practical thing. We have them. And my money is my money, yours is yours, my property is mine, and yours is yours. Americans own America. And so that's our private property collectively.
Oh, I
Just to
fully agree
follow
with
up
you
what Scott
about
said.
taxpayers' money should not be spent on anyone coming here, but I disagree with the principle that there was some point in time where it ceased being a good thing for people to come here. So again,
No,
we could talk forever on that.
okay.
So,
All right. I just want to say I did not say that. I just said there were distinctions.
all right,
There were differences. But
Okay,
okay.
guys,
appreciate it.
I'm gonna have to stop the border
Yeah,
talk real quick because I've been exhausted by the border
thanks. I got
talk
to
on
go anyway,
here
but
the
I
past
appreciate the
couple.
time.
If
Yeah.
I
Okay.
can,
Thanks,
if
Jeff.
I can say just the follow up for everybody's
Sure.
information, This coming Tuesday at the LNC platform committee discussion, the border is going to be the number one issue discussed. So just for your information, in case you want to, snoop in and listen. So.
Yeah, I was actually interested in that. So thanks.
What would happen if all of this hatred for immigrants was actually directed toward the welfare state and toward getting rid of the welfare state, which is your alleged reason for hating immigrants?
No one used the word hate. I don't hate immigrants.
Okay, wait, hold on, you guys. So right now we're doing a presidential candidates analysis. So I don't want to devolve into
I
a
just never
border
used the word
debate at
hate.
the end. Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, but let's just disregard that whole thing. So, Fountainhead, if you'd like to make any comments about the candidates, something that you find to be a strength or weakness, you're more than welcome to contribute that to the conversation because that's what the space is about.
Well, since I have my own show, I would like to point out.
I'm sorry,
Again,
I can't hear you.
running for why do we have so many people running for president, especially when we have two guys from California running for president, and yet neither one of them could be bothered to run for governor in 2022. The LP had nobody running for governor. So I mean, some of these people, I just ask myself, why are they running for president? I mean, it seems like our energy would be better spent elsewhere and running for other offices where we need people.
Okay, well that's a fair criticism. But now we'll move along to see if anybody else has anything to add regarding the candidates as we're wrapping up the discussion on the various candidates. So I'm looking for any strengths or weaknesses that you find in the candidates.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I guess I can kind of sum up my view of the candidates, and I think that overall, Joshua Smith is the one who I guess I agree with most. And then I think that Michael Rechtenwald, I'd put John Toad as number two, but he's not serious. So I basically put Michael Rechtenwald as number two. So going to the convention, I think I'll be looking primarily for those two to support Joshua Smith or Michael Rechtenwald. Based upon their positions, and both of them, have pros and cons. And personally, I think it would be best if we had a candidate who has the positions of Joshua Smith, the endorsements of Michael Rechtenwald, and the delivery of someone like Mike Termott. But we don't have that. We don't have that combination. So in terms of making the balancing act, I think I'm going for Joshua Smith, Mike Rechtenwald, and I'd also consider Mike Termott as number three. So that's how I line up.
okay. And I don't know if I'm saying this correct. Kennedy or Kennedy, something like that. Go
Yeah,
ahead
Kennedy.
and please
Thank.
wait. Please just make it on topic, please, or
I will. I will.
I'll slash you out of here. Thank you.
I just want to throw my 2 cents in. Joshua Smith would be the choice. He's unapologetically anti-abortion. He presents himself as a Christian, but doesn't lead with being a Christian, which I think is a value more than a detriment, because I think that means his values and his ideology fits into the mold of being a Christian without actually having to project himself as one, which can be a turnoff to certain people. I also think as far as the social issues, is like the trans and kids and things like that, he's been unapologetic about that as well. And I think you do have Lars and Chase who are more in line with accepting that as being some kind of a personal liberty. Personally, I view that as harming children. So, if there's kind of two separate sides, I think, in the candidates. And I think on the side that would contain Josh, he would be the number one there. And I think, I know it kind of, it's still on the topic of the presidential candidates. You need a candidate for the party who can project the ideology of the party and do it in a loud, energetic way. And I think ultimately whoever's chosen is the person you're choosing to voice the party for the next 4 years. So that needs to be well thought out. It needs to be chosen. It needs to be someone who can project those ideals. Sorry, I got my dog's barking in the background. So more or less, I would say Josh would be Josh is my choice personally, but I think when you were talking Christian caucus specifically and anything in that area, I think that he's the obvious candidate. But again, I'm not in the caucus itself, but he's my choice, and those would be the outstanding issues in regards to this topic here. Who the person that I would point to. So thanks for having me up.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Okay, I guess I'll just close out for myself, just kind of saying that really only Rechtenwald and Josh Smith are the only two that I could probably justify supporting. I would happily support either of them, I believe, at this point. And the rest of them, there's too many deal breakers. Like I said, there's some stuff that I find either positive or at least interesting, maybe even if it wasn't a good idea to go for a main delegate for Lars. But that's like the best I could say about the other ones is they've got some good qualities, but they've got too many deal breakers. So I think like for me personally, and like I said, this is just my personal stance because the caucus is not officially going to be endorsing anyone. So this is just fully my stance, and anyone is welcome to support who they want in the caucus. But from what I've seen in our interviews and in various debates, messaging online, etc., um, you know, like I agree with Albert that it would be great if we could combine the strengths of Rechtenwald and the strengths of Josh into this super candidate, but we cannot. So we're just left with choosing between the two. I personally am having trouble deciding between them. I like and like all those strengths that Kennedy said, I agree with, and they're like very important strengths to have. I just have trouble with some of the combativeness, and that representing the party and representing Christians. So that's kind of my hesitation on Josh. Um, that yeah, and but I really think he's great, and I think Rechtenwald is great. I wish he could have some of Josh's charisma, and Josh could temper himself with some of Rechtenwald's, you know, approach, and we could kind of like get a middle ground on the both of them. But yeah, that's where I stand so far. I think that some of my stances have changed over time on these candidates, some moving up, some moving down. So, and it helped to hear your guys' opinions as well in this wrap up session. So, thank you guys for everybody who's been along the journey for the series of interviews and taking the time to talk about these candidates. I'll let Jessica and Greg and Albert finish up if you guys want to add any last thoughts.
If I may add my last thoughts, I'm sitting outside my destination. I've enjoyed this immensely. This has been very enjoyable, even educational. I agree with a lot of what Kara just said, frankly. I also agree very much with, Jessica, is that you? With your positions on Christianity and your concern with these positions being consistent with your Christian beliefs. I certainly agree with that as well. And Albert, likewise, you made very great, insightful comments. I thought Joshua Smith was the best. Richtenwald probably second because Josh Anderson just was not prepared. The other two gentlemen, impressive individuals, frankly, accomplished. They present themselves well and intelligent. But yes, I am a pro-life person. I am with the Center for Natural Law, and natural law is all important to us here, which is quintessentially pro-life. So the two gentlemen that are most consistent with natural law and which means pro-life, of course, Josh Smith and Michael Rechtenwald. So that's who I would defend and nominate. So again, thank you all. This is Greg LaPointe, Center for Natural Law. I've got to sign off at this time. Very much appreciate being a part of the group.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this.
Thank you, and God bless you all.
Bless you. All right, Jessica, would you like to share any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's so difficult that none of them are perfect. I have definitely changed my views on some of them over the course of our interviews and the debates I've watched. I want to take all of them, put them together in one big ball of clay, and then mold a whole nother person out of them. It's very tough. It's going to be a really tough decision for the party in May. I'm sure each of them has a strong camp behind them, and we will just see what happens. And, hopefully whoever we get is going to be great at spreading liberty to the nation, because that's who needs to hear about libertarianism. We obviously have our areas of interest that are more specific and we love to see focus on, but without growth, we're not going to get very far nationally. So I just, hope for that. And I hope that we have been able to help anyone listening, anyone who's trying to decide, by just giving them the information and letting the candidates speak for themselves. So I've appreciated doing this. And unfortunately, not all of the candidates wanted to be a part of it, but, it is what it is. And I'm sure they were just busy. We've seen them all everywhere. So anyway, it's been great. And I'm looking forward to DC.
Albert, did you have any final thoughts, or did you kind of already say everything a little earlier?
Yeah, I pretty much said everything earlier on. I just want to thank everybody for participating. I think this has been an absolutely eye-opening series of interviews, and this final discussion has been great. And I've certainly learned a lot. And I'd like to thank Greg and you, Kara, and Jessica, who've really actively participated in this. And I think it's been fantastic. And, hope to see some of you in DC.
Yeah, this has been really great. I would like to say thank you, Albert, because this was kind of your thing, and I appreciate you including the Christian Caucus in this, because this was really great for us to be able to kind of stick our oar in the water with interviewing candidates and kind of see where they stand based on stuff that we were interested in. So thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this, and this was really beneficial for us as well. All right. Well, with that, I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good. Okay.
All right. Have a great rest of your Sunday, everyone.
Yes.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.